but whatever.
Hello, and welcome to Still Digging. I realize now my script is on the side, so I'm going to have to turn my head for a second. We are a group of archaeologists, behind-the-scenes stuff, who will be talking about archaeology, gaming, and pop culture. I'll let our esteemed panel of archaeologists introduce themselves, so please introduce yourselves.
All of us at once.
Yeah. Sara, you go first.
Chicken. I lost my screen. Hey, my name's Sara Head. I'm horrible at these. I host the Archie Fantasies podcast when it's running, and I swear it's coming back. Just give me some time. I also started doing reaction vids to Scott Walter's America Unearthed show, and I am a CRM archaeologist. I dig holes for a living, and I do science in the field because I am a scientist. I don't know. I don't have anything else. Yes, my hair is purple.
I'm Tom Cuthbertson. I also do CRM archaeology for a firm in Northern Virginia in the DC metro area for the most part. So I do a lot of the digging and also get to run some crews. This whole public outreach stuff is a little bit new to me still. I do a little bit of nonprofit work with archaeology in the community. By the way, if you want to give us money, the website is archaeologyIncommunity.com or bit.ly/AITC_DC. There's a donation spot on there. We run a whole bunch of really cool programs for kids for the most part. All of them so far is free, and we want to keep them that way. So put your money to work. Let's see, interests. I recently got into the pseudo-archaeology stuff, community archaeology junk, and some hybridity things and multivalent interpretations of material culture. Okay, that's enough talking. Somebody else.
Okay, I guess that leaves me. Hi, my name is Amma, or it's really Amanda, but I prefer Amma. I am a first-year PhD student at the Ainu and Indigenous Studies Center at Hokkaido University in northern Japan. I have additional degrees in East Asian Studies and Public Archaeology, but most of my experience and training in archaeology has been in Japan. I've spent the last 6+ years working on an excavation on the island of Reibun off the northern tip of Japan. It's called the Reibun Archaeological Field School, if you want to check that out online. My volunteering had to do a lot with actually assisting a group of field school students from different parts of the world, say Canada, the US, UK, kind of acclimate to life in Japan, as well as I assisted with the finds laboratory that we had on site. And then that kind of culminated in my research, which is looking at the public outreach that they were doing on site and really studying how the community was impacted by the outreach. So that's kind of my interest here now, and I'm going to try and continue that with my degree here. So I also do a bit of art on the side. If you check out my Twitter, I do some RPG related art as well as archaeology related artwork.
I guess, and finally, we're back to me. I'm Bill Octor. I'm a contract archaeologist from Maryland. I've mainly focused on historical archaeology in the region surrounding Chesapeake Bay. I've been a lifelong board games, tabletop role-playing games, video games, going back to Pong. I'm OG. I go back to Pong and pretty much anything else. And as a philosophy minor back in my undergrad times, I'm also interested in examining the world theoretically. So I'm the theoretical guy of the things here. So what are we here for? Why are we just talking, doing like introductions? So the goal of this show is to provide an insight into the world of archaeologists talking amongst themselves, that sort of hidden world when we get together, those secret cabals that Graham Hancock is sure that we're all doing. We are letting you in.
Deal with that later. I just hope you know.
I know. I'm just it's called foreshadowing. You know, we're in the biz here. We're just sort of teasing for what's coming up. there will be plenty of archaeological talk, but since most of us are also trained anthropologists, we will use the knowledge of interpreting other aspects as well, such as gaming and pop culture. Anybody else sort of with an idea of why we are here?
I came to game, but clearly I'm bad at that.
No.
Someday I'll actually show up.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I know we were so this idea for this tabletop RPG, I don't remember how do we start doing this? I think Bill put the call out for it.
Yeah.
Or talked to me at a MAC conference or somebody at a MAC conference, and that kind of got the ball rolling. But I think part of the idea is that we can use, I mean, D&D has gotten super popular again, tabletop role playing in general, and it's kind of a safe place to talk about difficult concepts within culture itself, and the production of knowledge and things that are pertinent to archaeology.
So yeah, we all sort of got together based upon our sort of collective experience trying to do tabletop role playing. So we've been playing Dungeons and Dragons now for, I've just realized that we've been off and on. Not everyone was there at the beginning, but by now we've been playing for about a year, and we're about to transition over to sort of creating our own sort of homebrew world of archaeology, which is going to be very tinged and very archaeologically themed. And the idea was we're going to present that to the public. We're going to do live stream stuff. We're going to be talking and so forth. And so we're still in the planning stages of that. The current ETA is that episode 0 is going to be sort of shot, probably streamed online sometime in July, with us really going into this new world beginning in September. But we've noticed that sort of our last couple D&D sessions, because we're archaeologists, we're busy, and this springtime, almost summer, or now we're almost summer today or summer tomorrow.
Because my kittens are all 1 year old.
Well, a lot of us are out working in the field, which makes coming to a game session really hard. So for the past couple game sessions, we actually haven't been playing. We have just been sort of chatting amongst ourselves online, because as you can see here, we are sort of spread out. I should actually put that out. Like Tom's in Northern Virginia, Sarah's in Pennsylvania, and Amma's coming to us from the future. She's somewhere in Japan in the future. She's already seen this episode, and she knows how much of a train wreck it's going to become.
I'm going to tap out early. I'm just kidding.
Gets really bad around 10 minutes. We're almost out.
And so basically the last time we did this, we got the idea of like, why don't we just stream this out and have other people join in? I mean, that's why we're going to sort of live stream. We're monitoring the chat. So if you want to participate along with us, you're more than welcome to, unless you're abusive, then we'll just kick you out. But other than that, we figured this would be a conversation, or talk about archaeology, talk about games, talk about whatever the hell we want to, really.
I'm continuing with a mukbang, so.
All right. So speaking of which, does anybody want to jump in with like the first thing that's sort of on their mind now?
Well, so we're talking about the tabletop RPG, and I saw an article earlier that I think, Bill, you retweeted, talking about mixed race characters and racism and some of that stuff in just the structure of Dungeons and Dragons. So I don't know what our audience is at this point, but just so we're all on the same page, races in the real world is completely made up. It's all genetic variants, and it's not a real thing. It's a social construct. It doesn't mean anything. But in Dungeons and Dragons, it plays into very colonialist tropes about different races having different abilities or weaknesses or whatever. And part of the thing that I think we had been talking about addressing in this homebrew was either using everybody or setting it up so everybody's a single D&D race with variations around that race, or making the mechanics a little bit softer so it's more cultural attributes as opposed to racial attributes for their mechanics for how the game is played.
I think it's important that you brought that up, because it has been one of the things that's been catching us up a little, is the whole discussion of, well, I mean, I love D&D. My parents played D&D. I played D&D because my parents played D&D. So I'm used to it, that kind of stuff. But when you really start looking at it, like Bill said, we're all trained anthropologists. When you really start looking at it from like a cultural perspective, you really do start to see I don't think it's intentional, but it is basically racism, because you're classifying each one of the races. And of course, humans always come out on top, which makes sense at the time. But it's a very stark breakdown. Like, elves are good at this, dwarves are good at this, humans are good at this, and that kind of a thing. So when we were discussing this, we're like, let's just make a non-human race. And Bill was actually mentioning this, like he was picking he picked just not a generic race, but he picked one race, and everybody's going to be that race. But yeah, and then we're going to have to break it down culturally, because that reflects the real world a lot better than giving like racial bonuses, because that doesn't mean anything. But cultural traits, I think we do still have to be a little bit careful there, though, because I don't want us to fall into that whole idea of primitive versus civilized and one is better than the other, because I'm having a lot of issues with that right now while I'm reading Graham Hancock's new book, and it's really interested me. Just that whole idea that there's primitive people and then there were advanced people, and it really kind of pisses me off, because the point is not primitive and advanced. The point is, going back to us being humans, we only adapt new technology when we need it and when something isn't working for us anymore. So when you're looking at a group and you're like, oh, they're more primitive, it's like, no, they just don't have the same problems that the other group had, so they didn't need those solutions, or they found another way to solve that problem that you're not recognizing. So anyway, that's my rant.
Awesome rant. No. But I think that also goes and talks a lot about, fantasy and kind of the history of fantasy in a lot of ways. If you look at, some of the problems people have with, Tolkien and whatnot, it's apparent there too. And Tolkien is a lot of what informed a lot of, our kind of modern fantasy genre. So it's not something that's even isolated in D&D, but it's something that's been ongoing for a while now.
Yeah, I mean, even to the sort of more modern interpretations, like the Lord of the Rings movies, which are some of my favorite movies. But it's sort of blatantly obvious that it's the West with their sort of all Caucasian-looking creatures, no matter what mythical race they are, they're all Caucasian. And it's the darker folks from the East who are all the evil folks. The evil humans are a non-white humans during this. It's sort of like it's baked into sort of this idea of modern fantasy. So part of what I think we're trying to do here is sort of like trying to do the classic post-structuralist deconstruction here. We're trying to take apart the tropes. We're trying to reclaim it. If you want to like behind the scenes stuff, I'm trying to like look into this from like a very like post-colonial idea, so using like Homi Bhabha and Franz Fanon to sort of like sort of temper me when look at it, because if I didn't mention this already, I'm the dungeon master for the group, so yeah. I'm the one trying to put all this stuff together right now. So currently right now the idea is to use the Dungeons and Dragons race of the Tieflings. And if you're not familiar with Tieflings, picture in your mind a humanoid who is, I know everyone's flashing all circle stuff, but we don't get sick. But picture a humanoid with the characteristics of the classic sort of Victorian idea of devils. or late medieval Victorian ideas of devils. Horns, pitched tails. Some of them have cloven feet, and so forth. The skin can be various colors of like blues and purples and reds and stuff, and their eyes can be sort of a single translucent like red or yellow or things like that. And in the Dungeons and Dragons world, these are a race of creatures which have been cursed by demonic beings. Because in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, devils, demons, and angels all exist, as well as various other gods. There's a whole multiverse, and there's a whole pantheon in that world. So we're adapting sort of the idea of the tiefling because it is sort of a weird, problematic character. Not necessarily problematic is probably not the right word, but
well, the concepts that go into the tiefling are, but not. Again, I don't think any of this is intentional, which is the point of taking it apart. Like the point of having a deeper examination is to go past the surface and look at why things are the way they are. So it's like, I don't think the tiefling is intentionally problematic, but like you were saying, it's the Victorian idea of a demon. And, you were saying, how all of the races are Caucasian white in a way. There's the tieflings kind of fall into that. Like they're a pale gray color, they're white, they're pinkish. I don't know. I was trying to see if I could share some of the pictures up here, but I don't want to copyright people. Like there's some really great art out here about the tieflings, but I don't want to be like, hey, look at this art and then distribute people.
You got anything?
I could draw something real quickly, but no, I think in terms of usage and whatnot, we should probably have that arranged ahead of time in terms of giving artists due credit.
Yeah, I mean, I wish there was a way that I could like share my screen because then you could see people's signatures. But anyway, I mean, all you gotta do is search for tiefling and it'll pop up. It's spelled the way it sounds. So, but I mean, the problems with the tieflings are that like they're corrupted. They're, we have this concept of pure versus evil. And that right there is a construct, what's evil, what's good. We're going with the Victorian idea of it, which, can we just talk about the Victorians for a while?
But before we do that, I see we have our first question from the chat. Thank you very much, VTEX Rules. So our first question is, archaeologist and avid D&D player here. How do you all first become interested in the intersection between archaeology and RPGs?
So I think some of it, at least for me, was it's definitely getting into the more of the mainstream, maybe not mainstream media, but it's definitely becoming a much more widespread media outlet. These, live play games and gameplay podcasts and things like that are becoming more and more popular. And it's an easy way to introduce anthropological topics into I guess a rich story or potentially rich story, depending on how good we're playing that day.
Yeah.
And that was kind of where that's the angle I was coming at from it. I played a little when I was in middle and high school, but I really haven't played until we started doing this again last year. So, for me, it's, I don't really have any hobbies outside of archaeology anymore. So may as well fit some of this into that as well.
Yeah, for me, it goes back to sort of the beginning, playing these things. The earliest sort of like role-playing games I've played have all been leaned heavily on the entire trope. A relic hunter. You go into the dungeon or the crypt and you're searching for lost ancient treasures. The idea of there's secret knowledge in the world for that previous civilizations have, and all you have to do is go through this dungeon and go through all these traps and things like that, and you can unearth things that can alter the world. And as a kid, those are all fascinating things. As an adult, you realize that doesn't do credit for the people who were living back then. You're superimposing other things. But I would argue that like a game like Dungeons and Dragons has always been archaeological from the very beginning. With that sort of,
I was a huge fan of archaeology.
Yeah, with that whole reliance upon like the the relic hunting motif, you're jumping right into sort of the pop culture view of archaeology right there, which is another reason why we're doing this. We're sort of like trying to find ways to sort of come back the popular culture ideas of archaeology. Archaeology isn't about finding the big shiny thing or to finding the ancient thing that's going to change the world. If you watch, if you watch Indiana Jones, if you play Tomb Raider, at this point I cringe because they typically destroy the structure that they're in, which are most likely the most valuable cultural resources in there, to get some stupid piece of gold.
But they got the thing. The thing is important.
So, who among us can say that they weren't heavily influenced by Indiana Jones growing up, trying to get into archaeology? Any archaeologist I've spoke, yeah, exactly. They'll say something so it pops up.
Oh, something so. It belongs in a museum.
Yeah. But I was just thinking about this the other day, actually. So, Temple of Doom is the only one with any community archaeology in it. I'm going to argue that. So aside, we have to acknowledge there are a lot of terrible racist tropes throughout the movie. But the whole setup for the movie is essentially they get dropped in this village, and the village elder is asking the archaeologist to recover something that the community had lost, and return it to them, which, spoiler alert, he does. But that's, as far as any popular archaeology movie I can think of, about as close as to public archaeology I think I've ever seen in a movie. Can anybody jump on that?
Oh no, using unpaid slave labor to do your excavation is absolutely the ideal for public archaeology.
Well, not that part. It doesn't have the interaction part. Just that first scene and that last scene. Everything in the middle is just terrible racist tropes.
Can I jump in real quickly? I just wanted to say, if we do have viewers in the audience that, if there's any term that's unfamiliar that comes up in the chat, something like community or public archaeology, do feel free to chime in and ask for more definitions. I think that's kind of going to be what I'm going to end up doing for a lot of this podcast, is making sure that, the questions are asked for people that maybe don't have a background, but an interest in archaeology.
Yes,
absolutely. Thank you.
I know that is an issue I have had speaking to the public, is really getting in the weeds and getting lost in the weeds, and then no one can follow me there.
It's easy to get lost because it's that jargon thing, and again, it's an unintentional thing. We know what we're talking about.
Sometimes.
Well, it's kind of the problem, though.
Let me erase this.
So let's jump back to a little bit of archaeology, and let's so last time, like, you didn't see this, but last time we were talking, we sort of got the idea of our show here, Still Digging, by brainstorming a little bit, and we bumped into the works of Sir Mortimer Wheeler. Tom,
specifically this book that I'm saying words so it shows up on the screen. This one,
which for a lot of people of certain generations and certain things. So if we have any UK viewers right now, you're more than familiar with him. He was constantly on the BBC. Even some American viewers from the 70s. And
you can still find clips on YouTube today.
He's at this point now, he's probably most famous for his mustache, sort of his look, but then his actual writings or discoveries or things like that. He had a very unique look.
Check that
I would say
out.
that's a very American perspective there, though. I do think that,
absolutely. I think it's the Americans know him because of how he looks.
I would say there's definitely a different understanding of him and his contribution to archaeology in the UK.
I think with the book I was looking for that I think how we got on that topic was the whatever textbook I was flipping through had him as basically the inventor of what we would consider a unit, as opposed to just trench archaeology, as is common in the early 20th century. It was all landscape architects digging trenches across sites, looking at stratigraphy.
And by that, we were talking about the difference between sort of randomly digging a hole in the ground and pulling things out, as opposed to a unit, which is a controlled, defined space that could either be like 5 feet by 5 feet, 1 meter by 1 meter, and sort of measured out to a perfect square and dug systematically to control what we call stratigraphy, the changes between the soils on there. And it's a great tool for archaeologists to sort of tell time. One of the tools we use to tell time. Deposits are on top of each other. Typically, is newer than the deposit underneath. So that's what we mean when we're talking about like test units versus trenches. However, Amma was nice enough to point out that he may have had taken a little more credit, because early in his career, he was not alone in this. He was part of a husband and wife archaeological team. His wife, Tessa, was also a fully trained archaeologist in her own right, and her own work is worthy of study all by itself. So
or at least say something so people can see your picture.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so, I know. I'm sorry. Can they still see the kind of smaller image down at the bottom of the screen?
Yes. It doesn't come. It doesn't show up as well.
Okay.
It's a really great sketch.
Mhm.
I thought maybe I'd just kind of do this as my background contribution as well while we're talking, so that if a concept isn't clear, that this way we have kind of a visual representation of what things that we're kind of talking about.
That sounds like the worst RPG game ever.
Section 106 process.
Section 106, the RPG.
Oh!
So for those who aren't looking, we had another great question come through.
I'm not gonna lie.
Once again from BTEX Rules. Thank you for your contributions. Who aren't reading the chat. I love this. What do you think of RPGs as a teaching tool? For example, for my public archaeology class last semester, I ran an RPG session attempting to simulate the Section 106 process. Sarah, you laugh at that, but that is part of my underpinning for our D&D campaign. There is going to be some compliance archaeology.
Oh, man.
So for those who are, does anybody else want to explain Section 106?
You're ruining my escapism.
That's true.
So does someone else want to explain Section 106, or I can do it?
You stuck your foot out there, so.
Right. So in the United States, there is the National Historic Preservation Act, which sort of dictates how historic places are registered within the United States. Whether it's an old building or an archaeological site or a traditional cultural place for a native community, the National Historic Preservation Act. This is a very dumbed down version. Please, if you're really curious, Google this. But specifically, Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act doesn't exist anymore, but it exists because they rewrote the laws, and the actual title number has changed since then. But Section 106 is a shorthand for historic preservation professionals, particularly contract archaeologists or state archaeologists, to discuss the process of evaluating historic archaeological sites as historic places. And typically this is done for when what's called a federal undertaking, which basically means that something that's going to involve federal money or federal action, whether it's the government approving a contract or the government itself is actually funding or partially funding some sort of development project that could possibly affect a historic resource it first must be evaluated. So this is typically done by contract archaeologists because most states can't afford a full team of archaeologists to have on all the time. So a contract archaeologist will come out to a place, they will test the area, and they will give a recommendation about whether or not they believe there are resources on that site and the level of impact that the potential project or whatever is going to have upon it. That's sort of a very quick, off the top of my head, description on this.
I do want to point out though.
If I miss anything.
No. Well, what you said is all. That's yes, all of those things. Also, our role as archaeologists is very much a background role. We as as contract archaeologists at least, don't actually have a final say in this process. We do our analysis, we give our recommendations, but everything is then left up to whatever the agency is and groups that are identified that are recognized as concerned parties or stakeholders. So it can be extremely frustrating, especially for a contract archaeologist, because you go and you do all this work and then it's just kind of out of your hands, and what happens to it is just it's part of the process, which is good and bad in certain ways.
Yeah, and the thing is, you may not be aware of this if you're not currently an archaeologist or a contract archaeologist. That is the majority of archaeology that takes place in the United States and in most countries that have similar types of laws. But most people don't really have a understanding of it. Most people have an understanding of archaeology as being something that they see on TV, and it's typically like through the academic model, with sort of big open areas that are sort of these large trenches and pits are opened up, and there's hundreds of people out there digging dirt and displacing things out there. That kind of stuff does happen, but that's not what's happening. Most of what's happening are these sort of smaller evaluations where reports get written and they get filed in the state, and most people will never read them because they go behind closed doors. So most archaeology that happens in the country is stuff that people never actually see or know about. So I think it's an important thing within sort of this idea of making a game and making it part of the thing here is to sort of have an educational element to that, is how do we explain this? How do we get this out there to a general audience with that? So the idea then is to try to incorporate those ideas into the game so that you, the person, whether you're an archaeologist or not, can get a little feel of what it's like to be a contract archaeologist.
Yeah.
But fantasy contract archaeologist.
Who can also shoot like fireballs.
Slightly less boring. Maybe slightly less frustrating.
You're a Tefling archaeologist who can move the dirt with a spell.
Isn't there actually like a square dirt spell?
There's a cantrip that you can move, I believe.
And my other character has like move a 1 meter square of dirt, and I'm like, perfect.
Done.
Right? It just comes out. Like, you just like move the whole thing to the sides, like, hey, stratigraphy. And then when you're done, you can just slowly like sift it. It's perfect.
This solves the problem of archaeology being destructive. We can just put it all right back.
And there's that. You just take it out, look at it, put it back, done.
Yeah.
Everything. You don't have to worry about the cap.
If you know how big the overburden is, you take out just that amount. You peek underneath. Are there any features in the soil? Nope. You put it right back down.
Hey, could you imagine though if that came out clean, what the stratigraphy would look like? Like you could just, and then you map all your shit. You're good to go. You wouldn't find much, but
it's like a soil boring, but bigger.
Yeah.
Well, like
square.
This would be great because then you could just like keep moving the dirt until you actually found like the feature, and then you wouldn't have to waste all that time digging to the feature. You could just be like, put the stuff back that isn't part of the feature. Be like, all of this lost dirt. You don't have to work. Nightmares is what we're talking about. Is nightmares.
I mean, this is going to have to be a scene when we start playing. It's going to have to be
after the 106 negotiations. Then we're going to start moving the dirt.
Yeah, I'm still struggling to find a way to make excavation and the archaeological investigation fun and interesting.
I'm watching Amma
That
draw.
I think is going to take some work.
I'm still workshopping that.
I'm gonna
I
need
do-
to draw my character when we finally make them all tieflings because I love them.
Oh my gosh, I'm here for it.
I do want to add though that so all these gray literature reports, they go to the state, but they are available, but you have to request them. And generally speaking, a lot of the archaeological data is only available to archaeologists. So I think part of what we also need to do is get those reports and assemblages and data sets kind of like on the radar of academics, because there's just so much data, and I can't tell you how many times I've been told by academics that I'm not an archaeologist.
Okay, so here's something else I want to talk about, because this animosity between CRM people and academic people, like, I don't encounter it too much, which is kind of shocking considering most of my online acquaintances are academics. I get a lot of, when I'm working out in the field though, I get a lot of field people who kind of are annoyed with academic people. And what I'm starting to notice there is that the field people have this concept of what the academic archaeologist is like, and they're irritated at the stereotype. And academic archaeologists have no fucking clue what we do. Like, they have absolutely no fucking clue what we do. And so it's not even like they're being mean towards us. Like, it's not like they're discounting us. They just literally don't understand what we do. And on the one hand, that's kind of a failure on their part. They really need to maybe, I don't know, educate themselves, considering we outnumber them like, what, 4-1 or something like that? Yeah. But at the same time, it would really help if people in the field would maybe like tune that shit down a little. The academics are not our enemies because they don't even know we exist.
Yeah. Do you think that in part though has to do with I think you had a conversation earlier on Twitter about where people learn how to practice, you know, the basic tenets of it. Seems like it's learned a lot on the job.
It is
in terms of, and that could be part of it too. If you're in academia and you don't get that chance to interface with that information, and it's all more skill based in the field, then you're going to have this continuation where people aren't really learning that aspect of archaeology.
Yeah, I think we need to, as a field and as a whole, I think we need to work together better to kind of intermingle. We need to get academics out in a CRM field, and we need to put CRM people in an academic setting, because what we do is very different, but it's still archaeology. It's just academics tend to deal more with, they tend to deal more with like the finished product. Like, you guys get the really nice, what we would consider a phase 3. So you're already going out to a place where you already know there's supposed to be stuff there. I'm not mad. It's just like and I shouldn't be using that kind of language. What I have noticed that academics don't see is the phase 1 and the phase 2. They don't see me trudging 10 miles back and forth across a mud-soaked field looking to see if I can find an artifact on the surface so that I don't have to go back out there and dig 80-centimeter holes. That amount of labor is not being recognized, and it's also being discounted. Like, it's not, when it is noticed by an academic, it's not considered real archaeology. They don't see that as me actually surveying or me actually doing archaeology. They are like, oh, you're just digging a hole and seeing if there's something there. And it's like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. And it being negative is part of science. It's not just me getting paid to go dig a hole for 10 hours a day.
Anyway, would you say that that's also indicative though of like societally, like how we, you know, approach, say, labor versus, you know, more information based work?
Yeah, no, and I mean, and when I speak with my academic acquaintances, and some of them are actually my friends, like, I get that the level of research that they are doing is like beyond anything that I am ever required to do for the field. Doesn't mean I can't do it. It just means it's not required for me to do it. And like, I get that.
Not the scope.
Well, and there's that too. I mean, we're very budget driven. which is it's a handicap, but it's a reality of the field. You know, I mean, you have to learn to work within those parameters. I can do that kind of stuff in my spare time, and I do on the topics that I want to research. But that's all on my time. So if I have worked 10-hour shifts and I'm on the first day of my 4-day, I'm gonna sleep. You know, I don't have time to do research that day, so I don't have as much time to do research as an academic does. But at the same time, I think if I was doing 10 hours of research every day for 10 days, I think I'd be mentally burned out just as physically burned out as I am doing field work. So I mean, it's a trade-off in that I don't think either of us are really acknowledging the work and the labor that the other does because we don't interact with it.
I think go ahead.
I mean, I think a lot of it, I mean, not a lot of it, but I think another point of this is that this sort of resentment to the academic is not necessarily meant to the person at the university. It may be aimed to the MAs, MSs, and PhDs within their own firms or the agencies involved. You will hear shovel bums, which is the very nice term. We like to call ourselves those who are field techs. We're the ones they like to call themselves shovel bums, and I was very proud of it when I was a shovel bum. I was proud to call myself a shovel bum.
We've really created this whole like martyr complex around it.
Well, I think CRM archaeologists are basically deep in the martyr complex. They are definitely not well paid. They definitely don't get good benefits. They don't get good work conditions. They don't have good prospects for continuous employment. They don't have good prospects for advancement. But they do it because they are passionate about archaeology and things that are out there. So what you'll do is it's not atypical at all to hear somebody who only has a bachelor's degree, who's been digging in the field for 10 years, really annoyed about that new MA or that new PhD who just came from university, who has never done a proper phase 1, which is sort of the open field investigations, like you're doing acres at a time.
Okay, hang on. To be fair, you don't even have to be digging that long to be annoyed by that person.
I'm sorry. I was trying to explain what that.
The first time newly minted whoever comes out into the field and they've never dug a hole in their life, and then they start telling you how to do your job, you're gonna get annoyed. It's just the way it is.
We've had a couple of those on very big projects with tight deadlines, and it is absolutely infuriating.
It's gonna happen.
We had a tech tell somebody who was just a BA who had been working with us for a couple of years that it takes like a half hour to put a unit in. Like to just like set the square up, half hour. That's what she said. I was like, who taught you how to do this?
How were they setting up the unit? Like
I don't know how it could possibly take you that long.
Oh, you know what I saw though? I mean, completely random topic here. I was going through the Forestry Supply magazine, and apparently they have various lengths of rope that are already marked off. And so all you have to do is like lay the rope out, and it makes your unit for you. You don't have to do math anymore. And I'm like, no, it's pretty cool actually.
I mean, I can see how it could take a little longer to like tie it into a bigger grid or whatever. But if you're still in the evaluation stage and you're just like, there's a whole bunch of good stuff here, throw a unit in it, see if we can find a feature. Like it's just you just put it in. Like
I did work with a company one time, and the person I got teamed up with was definitely struggling to put the unit in and would not accept help, because I guess they were determined that they were going to do it themselves. And I personally think it's kind of a two-man job. I think it goes faster, but that did actually take quite a bit, watching them continuously not get the unit right. So yeah, I mean.
So the key here for any aspiring archaeologist, if you've learned nothing else in your math courses, you need to know the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared is your friend. That's how we make these nice little perfect square holes out in the middle of nowhere.
So VTech just chimed in again. VTech rules, as an academic archaeologist, degree needs to be better cooperation and communication between academia and CRM. That's why I want to develop internship programs with CRM firms at my university. So actually, I'm a friend, colleague of mine is starting a tenure position at a local university in fall, and she's already been like starting to talk to me about like, can we get somebody from your firm to just come and talk to students about what work is like, or maybe we talk about doing an internship program or something, which is something that my firm already does. But more on the environmental science side, we do have archaeology specific interns, but it's much more rare than the just environmental consulting internship.
That sounds actually like a really great program. One of the things that I was really happy with in my master's was that we brought in a lot of different people who were interacting with the public on various, in various different roles, from people who were crowdfunding archaeology and having digs where the public participated in it, to people, who had gone into other countries and set up heritage programs so that the local community could basically develop their economic, their local economic status while protecting their heritage. And I think, more of those practical type interactions in the classroom are really missing in general across the board, and really important to have. So that's really exciting to hear.
The public outreach is definitely becoming, based on some of the people I've talked to, is definitely becoming more of a staple in anthropology and archaeology programs across the board. And I do like seeing that trend. And I think there is definitely more of that, how do you get a job? And I'm just gonna come out and say I'm a huge Montpelier fanboy. I have only nice things to say about my experience there and the stuff and the programs that they've done out there. And I saw on their Instagram or Twitter or something that they were actually had a day for their field school students, how to set up a resume, how to set up your LinkedIn, how to apply for jobs, which is something that I mean, the field school experience that I had was nothing like that. Not saying that I didn't have a good field school. I thought it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot of good stuff. But that, having that, but I also did classical field school, so it has nothing to do with American archaeology at all. But seeing that, like, yeah, here are really what your job prospects look like. Here's really how you get your foot in the door. Let's get you set up so you're not, flipping burgers or something, or just not being able to use your anthropology degree.
Yeah, and
work into it.
And for those who aren't as familiar with Montpelier, it's in southwestern Virginia. It's a former mansion site of James Madison, his home, and a good chunk of the plantation site that he lives in there is now under a trust as a nonprofit there. And as part of that trust, they do continuing education and continued archaeological research. So it's a great example of sort of this third way of archaeology that we sort of haven't been talking about at all. We have the academic archaeology, we have contract archaeology, but there's this whole nonprofit sector, especially associated with like house museums or some of these larger presidential plantations, which are doing sort of their own public outreach. It's a nonprofit public education process. So that's an entire other wing of archaeology that's out there. So just in case anybody didn't know.
So,
they're
enjoying this. We're not talking about gaming. So I propose,
We'll come back to. You want to come back to gaming? Let's go back to gaming.
I propose that we now create a game that is happening. Sorry, my phone vibrated. That is happening at Montpelier, but it's supernatural White Wolf based, Cthulhu style.
Oh, whoa!
We might be able to get a player from there. I'll talk to some people.
On it.
See if they'll sponsor us.
Oh, that's to actually have
Wildest dreams.
a couple one shots of that. Just put the Scooby Doo thing together. Only we're all archaeologists, and we have to solve the mystery using archaeology.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
I
Mr.
mean,
Smithers.
to be fair, our one shot that Tom and I were at the Middle Atlantic Archaeology Conference back in March did take place at a plantation, and it was very Gothic horror. It's still in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, but it was definitely plantation Gothic horror.
Yeah, how did that go? I never heard anything about that.
It was great until everybody got too drunk.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I'll at least take some of the blame for that one.
Mr. Shots.
It wasn't my fault. I didn't buy most of those drinks.
That was your first problem.
Yeah.
And as a stressed out DM, I was the only sober person there because I'm trying to run this cat show.
But the players all did have a lot of fun, and we got a little bit of interest in it. So that's a start. That's something.
Yes. Oh no, it was great. I had a great time. The folks there who joined us were awesome. They were good sports, and they were excited. Maybe
we need to get a panel session to try it. If we can get a good.
Oh my god, that would be amazing.
If we can get a good homebrew thing together, I will certainly get ridiculed by my coworkers, but I don't really care.
Oh, the ideal would be to have an entire 3-hour session, which is us basically taking over the table and running a campaign for an audience. One shot.
Can the audience hackle us though? Because I have friends. I'm not even kidding. I have friends who do this professionally at Gen Con and at run fairs, where they go on stage and they play a live role play game, but they have the audience participation as well. So I don't know. It would be kind of fun. But I could ask them how to make that work.
There's definitely examples out there of other podcasts that just do straight D&D and other kind of role play games that do live shows. Like I'm thinking the Adventure Zone and whatnot, where they're able within, I think, 2 hours to get to sometimes pump a game out. Granted, it's condensed, but they're still a lot of fun. And I think they're good formats to draw upon when doing something like this for a panel.
Yeah, it's definitely part of the long-term plan is to do stuff like that.
I mean, we got 6 months until the MAC Mid-Atlantic Archaeology Conference. Request for request for abstracts comes out. Call for papers, whatever it's called.
The MAC.
So to switch, to keep it anthropology focused, but also D&D focused. I was reading an article yesterday in Mary Sue about how gay D&D has gotten.
Wow! All right, let's do this.
Let's just dive right in, because as an anthropologist, this is actually a very awesome thing, because much like a lot of other sort of genre stuff, if you're watching Following the Gamergate and other sort of these things of toxic fandoms, or if you watch the latest. Let's take all the women out of Endgame and re-release it. That happens.
Awesome. What was going on there?
There's sort of a culture war of sort of some folks who falsely believe that their particular sect or their group is has so controlled dominion over their particular fandom. But thankfully, D&D over the last 10 years or so, in particular things like best one on top of my head is Critical Role, has been bringing representation out, which is perfect because D&D is basically improv theater, and you know what? Let's bring the theater kids out, and if you bring the theater's kids out, there's going to be some queer there, and that is awesome.
I'm not a theater kid, and I fall into the queer spectrum, so you don't have to. I'm just saying, I think gaming's always been weird because I have usually been the only girl at a D&D table through most of my life gaming, but I am not the only female character in the campaign. And recently I have found out that 2 of the people that I used to long-term game with there for a while, 2 of them have transitioned. and they always played female characters. And so it was very interesting to me that, I mean, I'm not saying that all guys who play female characters are going to transition and vice versa. What I'm saying is that it's interesting to me that out of the small group of people that I run with to game with, that 2 of them transitioned, and before they even knew they could, you know, that's something that some people have to discover. Before they could do that, they were using gaming as a coping mechanism, basically, where they could create their ideal self as the opposite gender to, you know, kind of get some relief from that. I mean, gaming for me has always been, it's always been very therapeutic. Because it's a way, yes, it's escapism, but you're escaping by creating your ideal self, or you're creating, like, as I got older, I would create characters to challenge myself with. So I would handicap my characters somehow just to see, like, how can I interact with the world if I can't do X? And so it's, for me, it's a way of exploring the world. It's very therapeutic. I think everybody should role play. I honestly think it would be like the #1 thing that would make everybody nice to each other is to role play and put yourselves into other people's shoes. But I think that gaming has always been a little queer, and it's just now that it's safer to come out and be openly gay and openly queer and openly trans, like, now you're seeing it, but I think it was always there.
No, I agree with you. I would say it probably has always been there from the very beginning. And I think I read a similar article a couple months ago that was from a trans gamer who was talking about their use of the role playing experience as sort of testing out different. The beauty of role playing being is that I can be anybody I want. So I'm going to test out different personalities, different people, different genders, different ideas of what it means to be a person, and that's the freedom that role playing offers. Whether or not you're currently, having that internal debate or just something you want to do to grow as a person, I also see it as a great tool, like you mentioned, for empathy. If I'm going to play as a female who has been downtrodden, if you're playing role playing right, at some point you are going to become that person. I mean, it's one of the great things about role-playing games is there becomes a point where you drop my character is doing this to I'm doing this, or you'll come back to friends later, years from now. Remember when we were in that mine and I almost got killed, but thankfully, you came through in the last minute and did that. They're not talking about their characters. They're talking about themselves and the experience that they had together. And I think that's one of the awesome things that role-playing games have to offer.
Remember that one time you went into the mine and you drank that potion before we all were able to stop you? Yep, I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Remember how you turned into a green bunny that one time?
Or that time Tomag got so drunk he went on a vision quest.
One time Tomahawk became a...
Had to get the totem somehow. It's the mechanic. I had to do it.
No, that's an interesting thing, though. It's an interesting statement. Like, Tomahawk, I had to get the totem. And how did you get the totem? You went on a vision quest. Now, why? Why did you go on a vision quest? Why did it have to
Because I lost the drinking game.
I wasn't there for that, so I was not aware. That's right. You were drinking with the gnome, weren't you?
Well, it was basically like the way you described it. It sounded just like wood alcohol, and then
it was a venom, like a bee venom or a snake venom that had been fermented.
So we are currently recapping one of the games we recently had a couple months ago.
Yeah, I think
I
think you might have been gone that day, so I basically had your character, Amma, just go like, "Yeah, I'm not dealing with this." Bye.
Oh no, I was there because.
Oh, you were there for that one? Okay. Oh yeah.
So basically, Amma's character just followed Tamag around, shaking their head the entire time.
Yeah, and I waited for the last minute and stole my kill.
Stole my kill.
Stole it.
I feel like you probably deserved it.
I did. My character was kind of me in a tool bag.
So yes, this is we've had previous role playing experiences, and those are there. So we're hoping to bring those things. The big goal is to bring those things to you, dear viewer. So we're still experimenting. This part of what we're doing here tonight is sort of experimenting with this sort of video technology. I think we may accidentally be stepping into something that may be something more reoccurring. Sort of this chatting thing. It may not be the same format, may not be the same night. We may not do it for a full 2 hours. We may only do it for an hour, or we may do it that way. But
we've been generating solid content for about an hour now. It seems to be going okay.
I'm happy.
And we haven't even gotten to Binford yet.
Yeah.
No.
We kind of did, but not really.
Do we want to
talk about
or anywhere else we want to go?
Yeah.
Well, actually, we haven't even gotten to video games yet.
Yeah, let's talk about some portrayal of archaeology in popular media, and we can do video games and movies and stuff like that.
Most video games and movies about archaeology are bullshit. Okay, we can move on.
Well,
Fair.
Yeah. Why?
No. You can talk about like the intersection though of like pseudo-archaeology, video games and movies, and gaming, because they all kind of share, well, in comics, if you throw that in there too, they all have a common ancestor, basically, where they get like this weird, the weird bullshit idea of what an archaeologist is and what archaeology is, and that whole mysticism of like we're constantly uncovering the latest, greatest haunted whatever, and we're unleashing evil upon the world. I mean, even one of the most terrifying horror movies ever created, supposedly, starts off with an archaeological dig where they're uncovering which god is that?
Isis, Horus,
some
of the Mesopotamian. We need Megan here because it's one of the Mesopotamian ones.
Yeah,
Ishtar.
It might be Ishtar. Hold on, because that's usually one of the ones that's associated.
It's Pazuzu.
Okay. Boom.
Anyway. So anyway, they dig up an image of Pazuzu and it's possessed, and then they take it home and put it in their attic, and then the little girl becomes possessed by a demon, the demon Pazuzu.
Well, I think your good friend Jeb Carr would put it. It's all the fault of Lovecraft and the Victorians.
It's the Victorians first, and then Lovecraft. But yes. No, actually, Jed, thank you for that. Jed has an amazing book. Oh God. Falling off my shelves.
I got it right here also.
Mine's better because mine's hardback and oh no, it gets better. Hang on. Where'd it go? It's signed.
Ooh.
Fancy.
So Jeb, I hope you are watching for this shameless plug we're giving you right now. I mean,
read this book. It's pretty cool.
It's not shameless though. It's a really good book, and
you probably sold another 100 books right now because we showed it on the air.
Honestly, this is a really good book. This is I wish existed when I was going through college, because it's just. But like some of his chapters are supernatural relics and occulted archaeologists, and he also talks about relic hunters and haunted museums, and Cthulhu and the cosmic mythology. So he actually talks a lot about the common roots. I don't think he gets into like gaming in here, but he does talk about like pop culture and that kind of. No, I meant pop fiction, right? Yes. Anyway, but yeah, it does kind of go back to the Cthulhu. But Lovecraft wasn't the only one writing about that kind of stuff, and Lovecraft was kind of like part of a larger collective that was doing this kind of thing. I mean, even Conan Doyle was writing about archaeology in a kind of occulted way. So
I mean, you've got also. I was going to ask, does the book actually talk about archaeologists writing fiction or writing ghost stories? Because there's actually a tradition of that in the UK itself, where you have like I want to say like probably more antiquarians at that point in time who both publish travel logs on conducting archaeology. Yeah. Because I think that's important too, to recognize that within, the discipline's history as well, is the fact that, there's been contributions by, archaeologists for all terms of the word that have really initially contributed to that kind of sensationalism, I guess, and that supernatural element within archaeology.
Yeah. Well, the last chapter of the book is Revenge of Alternative Archaeology, which I think if nothing else, like if you can't ever read anything else of the book, you should read that last chapter, because he really sums up his arguments there about how basically because academic and professional archaeology kind of checked out, and we kind of just left the field there for like 40 years or something crazy like. And in that amount of time, that was when all of the alien abductions started becoming a thing, and you start seeing the shows like In Search of, and Sagan was trying to like preach about skepticism, and all of this shit's happening, and professional archaeology is basically silent through that entire time. And so one of the things that Jeb talks about is how our symbolism is taken away and it's co-opted by alternative pseudo archaeology. And you see that when you're reading things like Graham Hancock's book, because I have to read that right now, so you all have to suffer along with me. He really is, like, at the same time that he will completely go out of his way to badmouth professional archaeologists and how petty we are and how stupid we are and how this we are and how that we are, he'll then turn around and use our own tools to kind of try to prove his point. Like he'll try to use a C14 date or what he thinks is a C14 date to support an argument that he's trying to come up with. And it's like, A, you don't know what you're doing, and B, quit being a petty asshole. But it's his book. His book is currently one of the top selling archaeology books.
Number 3 on the New York Times bestseller.
Yeah, exactly. Name me one archaeology book written by an actual archaeologist talking about actual archaeology that's on the bestseller list right now.
I think it will. Sorry, hold on. I'm pulling it up right now.
No,
it's specifically on the science list.
Sarah's book doesn't come out till next month, and that's when it'll probably.
Oh, sorry, it dropped.
Yeah. Her book is coming out, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be up there pretty high.
I hope so.
If you're still interested in the topic, there's a couple of articles I know out of the UK as well that discuss pseudo archaeology. Actually came out of UCL as well. So I think Tim Shadlahal and Gabe Mashenska both have some really fun articles on pseudo archaeology. And it's
kind of keep this my way. That'd be awesome.
I can do that.
No. Oh, I looked at the Amazon bestseller lists.
Don't do that. Why did you do that?
I guess I wanted to be sad.
He's sad.
Number 1 is Fingerprint of the Gods.
Are you looking in archaeology specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like 3 or 4 versions of Lost City of the Monkey God.
Which is also
kind of.
But do you also think that this kind of trend?
It's not good. It's there. It sells.
Sorry, what were you saying?
Do you think this trend intersects with the fact that, the conversation we were having earlier about doing an RPG at a conference, the fact that, you may or may not receive, some kind of chiding from the community at large, thinking that this is not what a professional archaeologist does, is that kind of mass consumption or fictionalized, even fantastical works?
I don't know. I feel like I don't know.
I think it's moving. We're moving towards, at least, well, in the Twitter microcosm, we seem to be moving towards that. We need to be doing more popular media outreach because we're just not competing with the pseudoscience right now. We're just getting blown out of the water. We're not. It's not a competition. We're not even the same division. It's just we don't exist. We don't exist on that same plane.
And I think this is actually one spot where like the contract archaeologists or the non tenured track or the aspiring academic archaeologist has an advantage. We don't have the same stigma that certain departments will have. I know people who are in academics who want to be more involved in this sort of combating, be more public, but we're not even necessarily fighting pseudo archaeologists, just doing public outreach in general. But they're getting internal pressure about what journal articles do you get? Are you being published? What kind of grant money are you bringing in? So they're getting these sort of internal pressures within the academic structure, which sort of precludes them from engaging in sort of a more public outreach. I mean, a lot do, and I know, and they're doing great stuff, but I know there's a lot who are being sort of stymied because of this sort of passion towards publication that sort of has overtaken a lot of universities. So those of us, publish or die, that model. So for those of us who don't have to worry about that type of concern, we have more freedom. No one I work for is going to care if I go on the internet and talk about gaming and archaeology, and I will not be looked at any differently because they already think I'm a big nerd. So
I mean,
go ahead.
My company has certain guidelines for social media and things like that, but basically it's just don't talk about confidential projects. That's pretty much it. And don't talk trash about agency people or clients or things. Very, very, just be a professional. Like it's very
anyway. But when I first started doing the pseudo archaeology thing, and I still get this sometimes in the field when I mention it, people don't understand why. Like they don't understand why I'm bothering. Oh, it's a waste of time. Everybody knows it's entertainment. And when I very first started out writing, writing the blog, I did try to reach out to more professional academic archaeologists because I wanted to interview real people about these kind of things. And I got some outright hostile responses to my requests. And I don't feel, I mean, I'm not the best query letter writer, but I'm not that bad. And it wasn't until after the podcast took off, and I think Ken actually helped quite a bit here. He kind of gave me a little bit of credibility. But after that, people still, every now and then I still reach out to somebody and they're like, oh, no. So I think there is a stigma out there. And I think it does impact the professional academic branch, maybe even the public archaeology branch, a little bit more than it impacts us, but only because they're so much more front facing to the public. I mean, I know that sounds really weird because when your chances of encountering a CRM archaeologist are much higher than your chances of encountering an academic or a public archaeologist in the wild. But like Tom was saying, as long as I'm not bad mouthing the company I'm working for or telling about anything that I'm digging at the time, I'm fine. I can pretty much do whatever I want as long as I'm not being an absolute jackass. But a professional or an academic person, they say the wrong thing to the wrong person, it gets recorded at the wrong place and somebody sees it and they could lose their jobs just because they're on the bad side of somebody. So I understand the hesitance there.
Yeah, and especially for agency positions where they are potentially politically motivated positions.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not part of academia because the politics, just crazy talk.
I've actually got a good story about that specifically for academics regarding ancient aliens. So I took a couple in undergrad. I took a couple of, I was an art history. Well, sorry, I was a history of art major because Ohio State doesn't have an art history major. My undergrad degree is in history. I ended up switching again anyway. But I ended up taking a East Asian art history class, and part of that class was a discussion of a Buddhist like temple cave complex in southern India that I started watching it because it was talking about the specific the episode because it was talking about the specific temple complex because I was like, oh, that's familiar. Let me see what they have to say about it. And actually interviewed local archaeologists, so actual like Indian archaeologists, South Asian archaeologists at the site. Who gave a good description of what the site is, everything they know, things they know about it, and also a professor of mine did an interview. It looked like some sort of stock interview or for something else because it looked like it was older than the actual episode, but they just kind of clipped it into the beginning of the episode, and it was all like there's a solstice window here, and the images in the frescoes or not fresco murals in the temple depict the previous lives of the Buddha, blah blah blah, and then it like the music changes and it's like, but actually, they couldn't have possibly painted these things if they hadn't actually seen them. So there were definitely people with horse heads. Like, it was it completely removes any kind of agency or imagination from people of color, local, and it kind of really solidified that racist colonial theory that is the core of Ancient Aliens.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting when I was interviewing Left Coast Notes on Twitter. She and I sat down and talked about the I'm not going to do that word because I'm going to butcher it. Anyway, she studies these specific kind of
the fossil.
Yeah, but they're considered holy relics by the groups that she studies. But she was telling me that Ancient Aliens apparently is really popular with the conservative politicians in India because of the messages that it brings about like superiority and that kind of stuff. And it's interesting to me that it's being co-opted by groups outside of the US for political reasons in order to like create a power play there. And it's terrifying personally, I think, that that's occurring.
Yeah, shalagrams.
Yeah.
Shalagram.
Shalagrams. I think it's shalagrams. Yeah. She'll correct it later, I hope. I'm sorry.
They look super cool, and I like that they're
cool.
like eco facts that have been turned into cultural items.
But I get a link in chat.
I can link her thread.
Yeah, she just got a really great picture of them up too.
Yeah, several really cool pictures of them.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find the thread start.
I think I published that podcast.
I think you retweeted it at some point also, but let me see if I can just find her thread.
Yeah, but just show some of her pictures because she's got really pretty stuff.
Yeah. Here we go.
Do we want to loop back into gaming specifically at all and kind of talk about, examples that we either love or hate to love?
Well, I guess to sort of tie back into sort of the idea of like misappropriating cultures and things like that is I'm hopefully this weekend, you'll see on the same channel, my beginning to sort of like attempt to try to replay the Tomb Raider from 2013, the relaunch of the game, where I'll be sort of voicing over it. I don't know yet whether I'll do it live or record it and upload it, but with that game, it tries to sort of more officially make Lara Croft an aspiring a trained archaeologist, but it's sort of once again sort of steeps into sort of these sort of Orientalist tropes about this sort of like weird, mysterious culture stuck on this island with some mystic relics, a long secret that's been hidden, and you have to find the hidden secret. And it's going to take the Western woman from the UK to unlock this thing. You couldn't possibly have the anyone indigenous understand their own island or culture. But I'll explore that more as I'm playing the game. But that classic idea. I mean, Uncharted does this in their games of like, hey, let's bring in the outsider who's going to turn around and find this thing, even though all these local people are there. And it makes me think of like one of my favorite jokes from undergrad. I was in this theory of archaeology class, and we were talking about the Maya, and we were, Teotihuacan was being discussed and things like that, and sort of the idea of using modern tourism and how they sort of create simulations of the area through that, and how like one of the sort of funny, obvious jokes that you'll see from the Westerners, they're not necessarily intentionally doing the joke, is it's the idea of like whatever happened to the Maya, and in the class it was basically reminded the entire class is like Nothing. They're right here. They're the ones selling you the cheap souvenirs. They're the ones who are your tour guides. The Mayans didn't go anywhere. They're not a lost civilization. They are living people who are still there. And it's sort of that erasing of indigenous people. I mean, it's a common thing throughout the country. I mean, it's happened in the United States all over the place with sort of native communities of like in the late 19th century, you have the entire idea of, oh, well, the dying out. We're sending anthropologists out because we got to record the natives because they're all about to die. And it's no, we're still here.
The languages are not doing super great because of, what's the Christian schools or whatever. But they're not gone. And and that's how I called Scott Walter a racist.
Wow, I don't feel like he gets called that enough.
Well, yeah, I mean that was the whole the conversation. I don't even know how we even got there. He said, well, I started
saying that the Mandan of today are not true Mandan, they're not pure blood Mandan.
And that's a quote. Pure blood.
Yeah, it is. He said. Yeah, I have a screenshot of it.
I called him a racist, and then he said that wasn't necessary, and I said it absolutely was.
And then he tried to defend himself, and you know how he defended himself?
For a while.
I know people who are Native American. Therefore, everything I have to say now, God, that man. Anyway.
Oh, speaking of which, so did he find the real killer from London, the Ripper?
Yes, it's apparently. I don't know if you followed Ken's thread at all, but apparently Conan Doyle is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is Jack the Ripper, because of course he is.
Because Mason's in something.
Yes, exactly. It's because Conan Doyle was a Mason, which of course he was. I mean, I'm not even being. Of course he was. He was a Victorian guy. He would have been a Mason of the upper echelon. Anyway, he claims that Conan Doyle fits the description of the Ripper to a T because the description we have of the Ripper is a white man in his late 20s, early 30s with dark hair and who wore a pea coat, a suit, and a red muffler. And I'm like, so that's like all of the men in the Victorian era. So apparently because of that, and he was a doctor.
Yeah.
That was the selling point, is he was a Mason and doctor.
I liked the every time he saw some sort of inscription, he would just give it a date.
Right? Like he just looks at, he actually claims that he created, what does he call it?
The Kensington Runestone?
No.
What are we?
He claims that he's
petrography or something like that.
Yeah, and he's like, no, it's accurate. And I'm like, well, that explains why no one uses it. So that man. I'm impressed with how long you talked to him, honestly.
I was struggling at the end there. The one that really got on my nerves is I actually read through the excerpts of the paper that he's put out because he hasn't actually published that technical report anywhere.
No, because
he published a review, which he refers to as a peer review, on his blog.
He has no fucking clue what peer review is.
Well, somebody in the office probably looked it over.
Oh yeah.
No, it was some other geologist looked at it and said, these things look okay, these things are a little weak. And I mean,
that's an evaluation. That's not a peer review.
Yeah, that's comments from a colleague. That's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the issue I had with it was that the analog that he used to determine how old it was a stone from near Augusta, Maine, I'm assuming the same material, but it doesn't actually say.
Right, exactly.
I wasn't able to find whether or not it's the same material. I assume it is.
I wouldn't.
And looked at the climate information between Kensington, Minnesota, and Augusta is like the next closest city to whatever the town was that this tombstone is from. And there's It's it's like on average like 4 or 5 degrees warmer and twice the amount of precipitation, which I don't know about. I mean, I'm not a geologist, but I think that has an effect on weathering. Just saying.
He is so. We could just turn this into the Scott Walter hate hour if you want, but
Can we make a game of it though?
I'd like to avoid what a libel lawsuit.
Yeah.
it's only
Yeah.
liable if I'm saying things that aren't true.
Ah, fair enough.
This is my opinion. I am not an expert.
Slander?
This is a game that I picked up at Gen Con.
I can't read the first word.
I know it's reversed. I don't know why. It's called This Belongs in a Museum.
I like it.
Why is mine reversed? Anyway, it's put out by Rather Dashing Games, which I love. Fun story though. This game, the Rather Dashing Games. Do you guys remember TAPS, the ghost hunters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the founding members of this game company is the bald guy off of TAPS. No, the guy with hair off of TAPS.
Oh, interesting.
Nice.
He went from ghost hunting to game making. He's actually a really nice guy. And he was the skeptic on the show anyway, so like I have very, very little problems with him. But the interesting thing I like about this game, I mean, you can see the tropes are already there. I mean, look at the characters you get to play. You know, you've got
Not problematic at all.
right, and I mean, but this is the kind of thing, like, this is not intentional. This is him. Well, I mean, the characters themselves are intentional because he's trying to invoke certain things, right? He's got Indiana Jones, he's got Sala, he's got, I don't know who she's supposed to be, but clearly she's like stereotypical woman who happens to be an archaeologist. And then you've got Professor Dry as Dust there, who also happens to be like kind of bougie.
Well, they all have to be bougie to archaeologists because, as we all know, archaeologists super bougie.
Yeah, somehow we all have money.
Yeah.
But like one of the premises of this game is that you go around and you collect relics and artifacts, and basically you're cutting your opponent off from being able to excavate in different areas. It's a tile game. It's a lot of fun actually, and it moves pretty fast once you start playing it. But it's playing off of all of those tropes, you know. It's playing off of the trope of, oh yeah, and then there's zombies. You can use the zombies to block your opponents. Not zombies. Zombies, sorry. I'm trying to see. Yeah, see, those are the relics you're looking for.
Oh no.
It makes no sense because there's no culture affiliation with any of this. It's just like random shit, basically. There's like a
But it definitely looks like they tried to make it kind of slightly global.
kind of, yeah. I mean, I gotta give them that much. And then there's like, this is the tomb, and there's zombie pieces there they are. I keep calling them zombies. There's the mummy pieces. You can use the mummies to block your opponents from being able to go to certain spots. Like I said, it's a fun little game, but
It's a treasure hunting game, right?
it's a treasure hunting game. But
Like all
calling
games.
it archaeology because I don't think they're being mean. I think that's what they think archaeology is.
I'm
And
gonna
they have-
add.
And they have no
Yeah,
reason not to.
Exactly.
Because that's how it's been presented in pop culture. Go back to the 1930 Boris Karloff Mummy movie. Go back to King Solomon's Mines,
Yep.
the book which I've been reading recently because I'm using that as partial inspiration for our campaign.
Inspiration.
Inspiration.
But I get these other games too. And this is a puzzle game. It's like they call it a locked room game, but this one's called the Pharaoh's Tomb, and they've got another one that's like Night at the Museum. And you have to solve riddles to progress through the game. And I haven't worked this one yet, so I'm not going to open it. But because you can only do this once, it's kind of annoying. Anyway,
So wait,
You can run
it's like a whatchamacallit? What are those things called? An escape room, but like in a game format?
yeah, it's exactly what it is. It's really, I mean, the one I played was really fun. It took me forever to get through it. You can play it by yourself or you can play it with a group, but you can only play it once or one per you. Like I could play it and then give it to one of you, but once you've solved all the riddles, you've solved all the riddles.
Right.
But if you compare it to the one that I did, it's got a lot of like imagery. This one's got a lot of Egyptian imagery on it. You've got to translate hieroglyphics. You've got to like get away from the thing before it gets you, kind of a scenario. But again, it goes back to that whole like that trope. Andrew Reinhardt shared an article months ago now that literally was titled as "Does Bad Archaeology Make Good Games?" So yeah, what have you got? Oh, yeah.
So even role-playing games have gotten into this with history.
Here's
This one's
mine is
Northern
Crown.
Crown. It's
my boss actually recommended we look into this one because I told him about the project.
It reimagines. It's a sort of an alternate history of colonial, about the 17th century North America with magic, but it still has. It's a funny thing about this game. I mean,
they're like Seventh Seas.
Kind of, but they rename sort of the European colonies and nations, but the natives they keep with their own names. Like you have, I'm trying to get some of the. Of course, now I'm trying to find the. You have the Vinlanders. You have the.
That's like 7 Seas, man.
Sophians, who are like the free thinkers and rebels, and the witchlings, sort of a Puritan type people, and then you have the Cherokee, who are the Cherokee.
Are they like all the natives? All of the natives are Cherokees?
No. They use a couple.
There's a couple other tribes in there, I think.
Are there?
I think the Iroquois might be in there too.
Yeah, they might be.
Real quick, while Bill's looking, just to clarify with the Scott Walter stuff, I am not an expert on geology. I don't pretend to know better than him because I don't have a degree in this. I don't. The most geology I do is what I do with it at work, just identifying material for the most part. And while I did call him a racist. I do not. I mean, we all have our racial biases. I mean, I'm a cishet white dude, middle class. Like I have no room to speak on any of this really. I mean, I don't think he did it out of maliciousness. I think it's out of ignorance, and I think that's part of the thing that.
Ignorance is the problem, though. If it was malicious,
that's the thing that we need to work against.
Yeah, if it was malicious, it would at least be understandable. It's the fact that he doesn't even understand that he's being racist. Yeah. And that he's propagating racist ideas and that he's creating racist narratives and then passing those along to other people who pick them up and run with them. I mean, no, I don't think any of these people are actively being racist, but
but they are propagating racist ideology
racist out of ignorance.
Right, and they're definitely propagating racist ideology, except for what's his name, Von Daniken, who's just a racist.
Yeah. And I think he's actually straight out and said some things that are just like, oh, okay, well.
Oh, it's in the book.
Yeah, we know. All right. At least you're being honest.
Okay, well, there you go.
All right.
and so to go back to the Northern Crowns with some of the races, first off, the Europeans are called Europeans. There's no E at the beginning. It's a Europeans. You have the
Europeans.
Albians, who are basically the English. You have the Samarians, who are the free blacks. In the game, they try not to talk about slavery, which is a big, huge omission if you're going to be talking about 18th century North America and not talk about the slave trade.
So that's the thing.
Which, of course, I absolutely get it, because one of our early drafts of trying to put this together was to sort of lean more into sort of the colonial period thing. Right. And then, we wanted to be honest to this, so we need to discuss slavery, but how do you role play slavery? Guess what? It's hard, and I haven't figured it out yet. That would be in any sort of way that would be respectful to the topic.
Right. I mean, honestly, do any of us have a right to, put ourselves in those shoes, kind of thing?
Well, it's really interesting because I belong to a couple different writing groups, and one of the writing groups I belong to is very heavily minority, which is kind of nice. I live in Philly. I'm usually outnumbered, and it's fan-fucking-tastic. But I brought that question up. I was like, I want to write characters who aren't. I want to have characters who aren't white in my books. When I'm not writing about aliens, and I'm like, but don't want it to just be like, here's placeholder, not white person. I'm like, how do I do that without trying to seem like I'm telling your story? And the women I've spoken with are all like, don't tell our story, but you can't not have us in the book either. Because if I ignore that there are people of color, then even if I'm doing it for the right reason, it's still achieving the same goal. And I'm still erasing them from the narrative. So like with the slavery thing, I don't think we can tell the slavery story, but having a slavery element in a game that we have to interact with, I don't think is a bad thing. Because like with this game that you're talking about, they're working really, really hard not to have slavery in there, but yet they have free blacks.
Right.
They're acknowledging slavery, but they're refusing to tell the story. Like, you can't have free blacks if you don't have enslaved ones.
Right.
So we're only going to tell about the good part of it, and we're going to ignore the bad. I don't know if it's the place of games to challenge social norms, but I think it's cowardly not to. I think games are the best way to do it, because you create a safe environment where people can interact with something that might be painful, but they can interact with it in a way that is safe to them. And I think roleplay should acknowledge that and interact with it. I don't think any of us specifically should be playing, if we were to play that game, I don't think any of us should be playing a slave or a free black. I mean, it's just,
Right.
I just feel like that would be ingenuous, especially as an adult. As an adult gamer, I understand why that's not a great idea. But having a few, as the GM, unfortunately, having a few of them for us to interact with is not out of the storyline.
Yeah, no, I mean, this brings us back to sort of another theoretical $10 word. Are all of our characters, whether non-player characters or the player characters, need to have agency. If you're telling a story, to avoid stereotypes, a person must, a character, sorry, playing with my hair too much, a character should have agency. They should have their own motivations, their own lives. They were here before the story began. They do something in your story, and then they go off stage and their story continues. If you're writing good characters, that's how it should be. The best way to sort of honor that is they are not a living embodiment of a stereotype. They are a full-fledged creature who happens to interact with your story and then goes off to continue their own adventure someplace else.
I think
completely take your story off the rails and decide to go follow them instead. So yes.
Well, that is role playing, and that is tabletop role playing 101 right there, where I'm going to write like 100 pages of like detailed orient thing, and then you see a cat walking down an alley, and you're going to follow that cat and just.
Oh yeah, I'm following that cat.
And then we just have a completely different story than everything I had mapped out. I feel for Matt Mercer on Critical Role when I see him take a piece of paper and just rip it up and like, I guess we're not doing that.
Yeah. Well, I think we can still maybe work in a playable, I don't want to call it a playable, like subjugated culture, or that's not the word I want. What's the word I want? Maybe it is subjugated. Yeah, I think that is the word I want. Maybe, but not like, just make it clear that it's not supposed to be the same. It's supposed to be this other thing that we created and kind of fills the same niche, but it's not. It's just we're not pretending to have that same experience. It's just, if we were put in that situation, how do we think we would deal with it?
Right. It's a way of talking about slavery without talking about chattel slavery in the Americas from the 15th through 19th century.
I mean, it's perfectly fine to draw that parallel, though, as long as we're acknowledging the fact that we are interacting with it as outsiders. Like,
right.
We can't understand the slave story. Like, none of us can. I mean, even those of us who might have like slave history, we can't interact with that. We can't speak to it. It is not it's not how we live currently. It has not affected our lives currently. But if someone else were to come into the game who wants to give it a shot because they think they have the ability to do so, I would be, I don't know, it would depend on the person. It's a case-by-case basis. But I don't think writing it out of a game completely is a good idea, Unless you're just going to be like, this world has never had slavery, ever.
I mean, that being said, if someone out there wants to put together the Nat Turner fan fiction where the Nat Turner rebellion is victorious and all the player characters are part of that rebellion,
That'd be
killing
fun.
all the slave owners and liberating the
That's a movie.
colony, then boom, sign me up. I want to play on that game.
I want that board. I want that
Did
to be a
anybody
board,
see the
tactical board game.
what was the? Didn't they make they redid Birth of a Nation, but it was centered around Nat Turner?
Well, they took the title "Birth of a Nation" and it was about the Nat Turner rebellion.
It wasn't redoing it. They just took the
Like,
title.
was
Yeah.
there a big blow up about that? And that was why.
They what?
There was a big blow up about that because the movie came out, and of course, well, the title for the movie came out. Everybody was pissed off because of that. People who understand what that movie's about. So there was that initial blow up, and then the actual movie came out, and everybody who was expecting it to be Birth of a Nation were really pissed off that it wasn't Birth of a Nation, and I was just like, I don't know.
If you went to that movie expecting a nice glowing story talking about the nobility of the Ku Klux Klan and how they're going to defend the honor of the women of the South, well, fuck you, and you deserve to be disappointed.
I was
seconded.
Like the initial outrage, I understood because I was like, why? Why are you making that movie? Why now are you making that movie? And then you get the whole story, and you're like, oh, all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean,
the symbology of the oppressor. I like it. I'm into that.
Yeah. Alma's been quiet, I think.
No, it's okay. I've been trying to find like background information. Like again, I said I want to make sure that anybody in chat, if they don't know what we're talking about, like I wanted to kind of provide that context.
And
the chat's been quiet. Screw those people.
Oh no.
So,
that's okay.
Just in case,
I know
they have been
people.
Yeah.
So to go way back to talking about video games again. Is I mean, and this, trust me, if this is completely out of your range, call me on it. But as our only sort of like Japanese cultural expert, the use of sort of Japanese myth and culture within the relaunch game of Tomb Raider. Have you had a chance to play that game?
I actually have not, but I do know some of the historical background of it, and it is historical in some regards because it deals with actually a piece, an annal from Chinese history that informs a lot of Japanese archaeology. So archaeology is actually more aligned with history in Japan than it is with anthropology. And so a lot of that is wrapped up with the kind of national identity in Japan, as well as national history and people's history. And so Himiko, who I believe is the central figure in that game, am I correct in that?
She's the MacGuffin.
Yeah.
Yes. That ties to a Chinese historical text, which through some interpretation has been associated closely with prehistoric culture on Japan. And so I know that much, but if I remember correctly from the movie, she's on an island somewhere, and I don't think it's even one of the Japanese mainland islands. Isn't it off of like Okinawa or somewhere between Okinawa and Taiwan or something like that?
Was that the news movie?
That's the movie, yeah.
The movie was not horrible. It wasn't great.
It was pretty close to the gameplay, to be honest.
Was it?
Yeah.
So I haven't listened to the latest Women in Archaeology podcast, which finally got around to discussing that movie. Sarah, were you on that show when they were talking about the movie?
Yeah, but we recorded that like last year.
Oh, it just came out like a couple weeks ago.
No, what's happening is we're updating the feed.
Oh.
So it probably just got reposted. But yes, I was on that episode. Please go listen to our feed. It's getting updated.
There's a Yamatai board game.
Oh yeah, so now that we're almost 2 hours into this, we should do more plugging. I'm a co-host on the CRM Archaeology podcast, part of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Sarah, of course, is Archie Fantasies, is coming back. She's also a co-host on the Women in Archaeology podcast.
I am occasionally
Occasional guest.
a panelist on the Women in Archaeology podcast. That is predominantly Chelsea, Kirsten, and Emily. I'm very, very proud of them. I really am, but I can't really claim too much about that one.
Anyone else have any plugs they need to do or want to do right now about associations?
I don't have any media outlets, but I'll plug AITC again. I'll put the link in the chat to their website.
I was going to volunteer with them, and I just never was able to get my shit together to do it. And now I'm too far away.
I think part of it is that Alex has been running this by herself basically for about 10 years, and it's hard. Like, she forgets that other people aren't inside her head sometimes.
No, it really was like, no, she sent me all the information. She's like, fill this out, do blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, it was when I was living in Virginia, and I was just like, man, I cannot get my life together enough to do this. And which I really regret, because it sounds like a freaking fantastic program.
It's absolutely amazing. So the whole concept is that it is community-based archaeology, community projects, community education. A lot of the programs that we run are education programs for underserved youth, specifically the Young Archaeologist Club has been run for a while now. We were able to, for the past year, make it completely free because of a generous grant from the Jack and Jill Foundation, and we were able to bring in it's about 25 kids per class or so. I might have that number wrong, but everything is completely free. We meet for a couple hours every Sunday for about 6 weeks. And we take them to a museum. We try to take them to an active dig site if we can. They learn about archaeology. All the kids are great. It's been extremely rewarding for me, just trying to, like, I feel like I'm selling my soul a little bit doing a lot of this contract archaeology, but it's definitely helpful for
Working is fun.
Yeah. And it's certainly a challenge, because I'm used to working with like full-grown adult volunteers and field school students and things like that, and trying to break it, like, and this is something that I've found that the more I have to teach a subject, then the more I have to break it down to its simplest pieces, the more I can understand that subject. So actually trying to teach children about archaeology is, I'm learning a lot as I go. Alex is fantastic. I do not have the energy or charisma she does, and I'm amazed every time I work with her. But we are always fundraising at all times. There's a link on the website. If you, and any little bit helps. You want to throw $5-10 in there. It all adds up. So please think about doing that. We do have an event coming up on July. Hold on. I just forgot what day it was. The Day of Archaeology something festival. It at the Dumbarton House in Northwest DC. If you live in the DC area, it is July. My webpage will load. It's on the website. You'll be able to find it. If you just go to the events, it'll come up. But it is July 20. July 20 is a Saturday. It is free. Archaeology groups from all over the area show up and put up tables and have little interactive exhibits and things like that. There are kids' activities. There's usually a DJ, a food truck, and it is completely free to attend. Just show up. If you want to make a donation, that's super cool too. But yeah, that's the thing that I work on.
Okay. Well, I see we're about 10 minutes left. So now would be a good time. If anybody has anything that they've wanted to say or wanted to make sure we talked about during this sort of inaugural episode, to sort of get out now, and we can have that discussion right now. Or I say we had a special guest right there. We had our first live comment. But if there's anything that you want to talk about now, or sort of maybe a summary statement, if there's not anything you want
I want
else
to poke
talk about.
Amma.
Say that again.
Said I want to poke you.
You want to poke me? Why do you want to poke me? What do you want to poke me about?
You got anything else you want to say before we take off?
Oh, that's a good question. Sorry, I've been a little quiet. It is, as was said, we're in the morning of it's Friday morning here, and I don't think my brain has woken up for the past 2 hours. So,
I understand you're not awaken on your toes right at this moment.
so no, my apologies. I'm gonna work on being a better contributor in this regard. No, I still have a lot of projects in the works that I'd like to hopefully bring about in kind of conjunction with this project. I'm really excited to be a part of it, and I think it will bring up a lot of really great information, conversation, dialogue, which I think is really important. And so, if you have any questions regarding Japanese archaeology, I can definitely handle those on my Twitter or my Instagram. But as of right now, in terms of projects to plug and whatnot, I don't really have much outside of my personal social media.
And I just put our Twitter tags up in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yay. Yeah, I don't really have anything going on right now. We just wrapped up the first round of What's Up Archaeology. It went really well, and it's all still live. That was really my only major side project that didn't deal directly with my social media. And as soon as I answer my email, I'll be working with Digital Hammurabi on their YouTube channel, doing some archaeology-based videos for them. Yeah, they're my intern. They're going to be my internship so that I can finish up my master's degree. And I'm really happy that they decided to work with me, because like while I've been doing my master's degree, it's going to be a master's in CRM, but like doing it the way that I did it, which I don't recommend. You really did make me kind of look at what I really actually wanted out of my career here. And I think maybe going the science education, science communication way is a lot more what I really want to be doing. And so they're giving me that opportunity by letting me work with their channel on YouTube, which is why I've been putting up videos lately. So.
And which go to ArchaeoFantasies on YouTube to see those videos and see those live reactions. And Megan of Digital Hammurabi was a former member of our D&D collective, but her schedule, she is still in the process of trying to finish her PhD, and between the PhD and her children and the YouTube channel, gaming just wasn't in the cards absolutely acceptable, but she's still a friend, and we go to her channel. They do great stuff. Her and her husband do great stuff over there.
If you haven't seen the rap video yet, which there's a lot to discuss there, but it is actually a really cool video, and her husband does a fantastic job of, is it the Iliad?
No, Gilgamesh. It's a story of Gilgamesh. It's a family-friendly story of Gilgamesh done in a very early 90s white guy rap style.
Very, yes.
Oh, no.
It's incredible.
But it is awesome. It's a great educational tool, and if you don't know the story of Gilgamesh, it gets all the points across.
It really does. It does it pretty quick. It's not very long either.
No.
He skips all the repetitions?
He does.
Yeah. Okay.
He also uses, what's really interesting about the way that he wrote the summary for the rap, he uses the same alliteration techniques in his rap that he wrote that were used to write the Iliad, or to write Gilgamesh. So it's the same poetic pentameter, whatever. It's funny.
It's good. Go see it.
Maybe that was a little too geeky for people.
I think that's the link there I dropped in the chat. I hope that's the right one.
It'll be something else from there. Tom, you have anything?
I think that's it. I think this went very, very well. I think I'm looking forward to like banging out this gameplay stuff so we can start doing that one as well.
Okay. Well, I want to thank the three of you for joining me today, and sort of this inaugural episode of Still Digging. I think the Still Digging show is going to live here on the Archeo Thoughts channel. Once the gaming gets up in the place, we might probably, hopefully, set up a separate channel for that, and we'll definitely keep you informed if we do that, or if we keep everything on this channel just for convenience sake. With that, but
I know we were talking about doing.
Well, it's the idea of the ArchaeoRPG might become its own entity. Sort of the idea of the collective of all of us is ArchaeoRPG, and then we have that living someplace else.
Yeah.
But this one as a show, which is like gaming, but also sort of general talk and archaeology, may not. Well, we'll see. And if we switch this show over there, we'll let you know, so you know where to catch us on there. As of right now, we don't necessarily have the next show scheduled, but keep an eye on the social medias. You got all our Twitters.
Sure.
We will definitely be letting everyone know. I have a feeling the next episode would probably be at the latest 2 weeks from now, maybe even next week. And if you're, an archaeologist or a gamer and you're interested in maybe joining us, being part of the conversation here on air with us, please shoot one of us out a DM, and we'd be more than happy to bring you on board and discuss, your interest in archaeology, gaming, pop culture with that. So I want to once again.
If you're a gamer and you have questions about archaeology, either incorporating it into your game or just like things you've interacted with in a game that you had questions about, feel free to ask us that too. Ask an archaeologist.
Yeah, shoot us questions. We'll definitely, if you shoot us just questions through there, we will definitely include those in our next episode. We'll definitely make a point of answering all the questions you guys give us during that time. So I think with all that, I think we are done with episode 1. Woo!
Yay.
So I'll let everyone else say goodbye, and then we will let you go to surf other things on the YouTubes.
Bye.
You guys.
All right. Goodbye. I don't have a ending tagline yet, so I'll just say you still have an hour before watching Critical Role, so we're not going to take up your time for that. So hop over to Twitch, and you can watch Critical Role, because I'll probably be doing that myself. I know we haven't caught up yet, so that's why we haven't done much Critical Role talk, because Alma's still trying to catch up.
I'm almost there.
But if you have watched recent episodes of Critical Role, you have seen her artwork.
Yeah,
she has been featured 2 times so far in the community art there.
It's adorable. Thank you very much.
I'm aiming to make more art. So again, if you follow me, I'll be dumping a whole lot more Critical Role art.
I like these people doing too on this.
All right, so here's my first test one. This might not stick around. So until next time, we're gonna still be digging. See ya. Bye.